Hello everyone, I am Demented Kirby, and welcome to my channel, the Commander Tavern. The Commander Tavern is a channel dedicated to my favorite Magic the Gathering format. On this episode of Barkeep Upkeep, I will be discussing some interesting cards that no doubt some of you may have never even heard of. There will be a little bit of history in this episode as well. That being said, this episode will be more similar to a flight since I will be discussing these cards and how to use them. Since the recent outbreak, many Magic players are quarantined or in isolation and thus playing online. These cards are a welcome change if you guys want to try something new when playing online, at least in Cockatrice. In fact, I keep an updated database for some of these sets as custom sets for Cockatrice, so if any of you are interested in being able to play with these cards, join me in my Discord server and I'll send you the files as well as explaining how to import them into Cockatrice. Likewise, if you have a quirky cube with lots of weird, fun, and wacky interactions, then some of these cards can definitely find a home there. Most of these cards do have an intense randomness to them, which might seem only accomplishable in a computer, but fear not, I have figured out how to emulate these in real life while still being true to their intended workings. So for any of you who have seen these cards but don't really know how they work, you'll soon know how. Now without further ado, let's see these cards. First up, I'm going to discuss the oldest of all of these, the Astral Set. This small set of cards were the exclusive cards designed for the microposed Magic the Gathering game Duel of the Planeswalkers. This video game introduces the plane of Chandalar as well as some new locations and characters on this plane. Since then, the locations and inhabitants of this plane have been mentioned or featured on actual cardboard cards. Some of these include Evos Isle, Colonia, Thune, Erd, Valkas, the Onake, and Sathrid. In fact, Chandalar was the plane where the Chain Veil was located, and Liliana isn't the only famous planeswalker to have visited Chandalar either. Leshrac, Teveshat, and even Up Nixilis have visited the plane. In fact, this is the plane where Up Nixilis got cursed in the first place. The story of the game is also pretty interesting, but that can be a topic for another video. Anyway, onto the cards. Aswan Jaguar. Although this is the image you would see in the game, I will display an updated wording next to the card so that you know exactly what it does. This is a great hoser against tribal decks if you manage to choose that creature type from the deck. But since some tribal decks have creatures with multiple types, you might strike out. That being said, it still destroys the creature while disallowing regeneration. Keep in mind that this ability is a piece of cake for a computer. You can still make this work in real life or playing on a platform like Cockatrice. It might take a bit of work, but it's still doable. Just take note of each instance of every creature type among creature cards in opponent's library only once. For example, if there are 2 instances of Shaman, write Shaman only once. Assign a number to each creature type and then choose a number at random. That would be the creature type assigned to Aswan Jaguar's ability. More often than not, this will be a number you can roll on a die. But that's fine since Cockatrice can roll a die of any number of faces. In real life, you might have to resort to using a smartphone to generate a random number. There are plenty of random number generators online, so it shouldn't be too much work to find one. Call from the Grave is a bit easier to use than Aswan Jaguar. All you have to do is take all the creature cards in all graveyards, shuffle them all together in a pile, and then reveal the first card from that pile. That is the creature Call from the Grave is targeting. Then just return the creature cards to their owner's graveyards. There are better reanimation effects and spells, but if you want that obscure card in your cube or game, this would be one to consider. Likewise, you can also just assign a number to each creature card in every graveyard and then choose a random number, and that would be the creature resurrected by Call from the Grave. Fairy Dragon is a spicy one indeed. A 1/3 with flying for 4 mana leaves a lot to be desired. However, its activated ability is quite the curiosity to say the least. The card doesn't tell you what it does. However, when you activate this in the original game, it chooses 1 out of 20 different possible outcomes at random, hence why it's called a random effect. There have been people out there who have successfully determined what these choices are. What I've done with this card is make it sort of a double-sided card, where all of the possible random effects are on the back of the card. This is definitely a fun card to use if you like chaotic things. So for all those people seeking to add chaotic elements to their games or their cubes without solely depending on red cards, this one might be for you. You might have to proxy it as a double-faced card in order to keep all the options conveniently in the same place, or keep the list somewhere handy if keeping it as a normal card. If you have Cockatrice, this is what the entry would look like if you were using the set I made for it. Again, the outcome can be determined via a random number generator as well. Now, since all the targets are random, you could do what you would normally do in such a situation, such as with cards like Scab Clan Giant. You can take all the creatures and shuffle them up in a pile, reveal the top one, and that's the random creature. Or you can assign a number to each one and then get a random number to choose as the target. Gem Bazaar is an interesting land since you don't really have any control of the color it taps for. When using this land, I just choose a random number between 1 and 5, with 1 being white, 2 being blue, etc. When using this land, not being able to choose which color might seem like a drawback, but at worst you can just use the resulting mana to pay generic costs. It doesn't enter the battlefield tapped and can tap for any random color without paying any life. Also, if Reflecting Pool is on the battlefield with it, Reflecting Pool would be able to tap down for any color since Gem Bazaar is capable of generating any color mana. Goblin Polka Band is a fun card just by looking at it. It reminds me of Goblin Snowman and other fun Goblin cards. In any case, this isn't a Goblin card you would want in your Goblin tribal deck. Quite the opposite, this card is a hoser against Goblin decks. What's interesting about this card is that it's a way to tap down X creatures but in mono red, which is pretty rare to say the least. However, any goblins tapped down by this ability don't untap at the beginning of their controller's next untap step. Since these targets are chosen at random, it might be possible for Goblin Polka Bandit to target itself. Similarly to the Scab Clan Giant tip I suggested earlier, just take all the creatures on the battlefield, then shuffle them up into a pile. Then reveal X cards from that pile, and those would be the targets of Goblin Polka's band's effects. Or, you can just assign each creature a number and then choose them via a random number generator, repeating this X times. Necropolis of Azure is an enchantment with an activation cost that's a tad high for what it does. It guest husk counters easily enough, but in order to generate a zombie token with Swamp Walk and a randomly generated power and toughness, you have to pay 5 generic mana to do so. And the largest this zombie could be is a 3/3, so it is possible you might end up paying 5 mana to get a 1/1 zombie token with Swamp Walk. You could also get a 3/1, 2/2, 2/3, etc. zombie creature token. For this token, its power and toughness could have different values, so it might be hard to keep track of it if using this card in real life. However, in a platform like Cockatrice, you can assign power and toughness to whatever it needs to be. Cockatrice can also very easily generate random numbers, so it's incredibly easy to use there. Orcish Catapult is quite the headache to use, so use this only if you like these kinds of mechanics. Here's how it works. You have to count how many creatures are on the battlefield. Call this number N. Then you choose a random number between 1 and N. Call this new number R. This is the possible number of targets for Orcish Catapult. Now take all the creatures on the battlefield and shuffle them into a pile. Then draw R cards from this pile. Those are the targets for Orcish Catapult's effect. Again, you can just assign a number to each creature and then choose those numbers at random. I recommend shuffling them in a pile because that's just easier to do. Now comes the interesting part. X is distributed at random amongst these creatures. Unlike cards like Fireball, where X is distributed evenly, rounded down, here they're randomly distributed. That means that once you have the chosen targets, you go to each one and assign a value between 0 and X. Call this value D. For each remaining creature, the remaining -0, -1 counters to give to each is X minus D each time you distribute counters amongst them. This is how this effect can be assimilated outside of the Macropose game. So it is possible to have a creature receive 0 counters or all the counters or some of the counters and then the remaining counters, etc. Again, this is quite costly to do in terms of time, but if you like these kinds of mechanics, you can find fun in it. Pandoras Box is another fun card and is quite chaotic since it can result in balanced, even to your own detriment. Here's how you can make it work whether in real life or Cockatrice. Note each creature in each library and assign a number to each one. Then choose a number at random. This is the creature chosen for Pandoras Box's ability. Now have each player flip a coin. Whoever flips heads gets a token that's a copy of that creature. It's definitely an interesting ability and can be pretty epic in decks with populate or other token strategies. Another thing you can do is have every player shuffle their library, then reveal cards from the top until they reveal a creature card. This would be the potential pool of creatures for which this effect can choose at random. Power Struggle is just like any other control exchange effect, except that the targets are chosen at random. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, they choose an artifact, creature, or land chosen at random. Once that card is chosen, a random card of the same type is chosen from opponent's permanents, and then they're exchanged. Once more, you can achieve this by shuffling. For example, the first player can shuffle all their artifacts, creatures, and lands into a pile. Again, you can also assign numbers and then choose a random number. Then reveal the top card of that pile. If it's an artifact, then all of that player's opponents shuffle all their artifacts into a pile and then reveal the top card. Those permanents are then exchanged. If the first player reveals an artifact creature, then that player's opponents shuffle all artifacts and creatures into a pile. This can be pretty fun if you like chaotic effects like these. Some players don't like chaotic effects. I have a bunch of chaotic effects in my own commander cube, so if you also like chaotic effects, nothing is more chaotic than randomly exchanging control of things. This enchantment is great in token builds since you can give away a subpar creature for something much better. Prismatic Dragon is unfortunately a pretty weak card. It's a 2/3 with flying for 4 mana. Its other abilities have a changing color at random, and that's pretty much it. That's all it does. Unfortunately, this card is neither interesting nor fun. At least it's pretty straightforward to use. Rainbow Knights is an excellent white weenie card that's useful in weenie decks or in Knight tribal decks. It's a 2/1 for 2 mana, which isn't bad. Additionally, it gets protection from a color chosen at random when it enters the battlefield. So it's really a 2/1 with protection for 2 mana. On top of that, you can pay 1 generic to give it first strike, and pay 2 white mana to take a gamble and give it either +0/+0, +1/+0, or +2/+0 until end of turn. Again, this is very easy to choose with a random number generator if you don't have a 3-sided die at hand. Paying 2 white for this ability is the only nerf this card gets because there is only a 1 in 3 chance of getting pumped +2/+0. However, there's also a 1 in 3 chance that you wasted 2 mana. That being said, it's definitely a great white weenie card. Whimsy is a card similar to Fairy Dragon but an X-costed instant, so this card will add X random effects to the stack once it resolves. As with Fairy Dragon, the pool from which it chooses a random effect is known, so while the card might only say play X random effects, what it's actually doing is putting X random effects onto the stack. You might have to proxy it as a double-faced card in order to keep all the options conveniently in the same place, or keep the list somewhere handy if keeping it as a normal card. If you have Cockatrice, this is what the entry would look like if you were using the set I made for it. You can also use any of my other suggestions when choosing its random targets. Whimsy has only 18 possible results, so it is less than Fairy Dragon. Even so, resolving this spell with a large X will definitely take a while to leave the stack. And that does it for the Astral Set. Some of these are interesting to say the least. Had I skills like the Proxy guy, I would definitely include some of these in Commander Cube like Call from the Grave, Gem Bazaar, Pandora's Box, and Power Struggle with a new and improved frame and updated look. In any case, let's move on to the next set of cards. The game for the Sega Dreamcast was released exclusively for Japan. The game takes place in a town called Magic Heart in an as of yet disclosed plane. Each of these cards made specifically for this game have an element of randomness to them. However, almost all of them have an effect similar to Haktos the Unscarred in that you have to choose a number at random from within a small interval. The value of those numbers were obtained similarly to how we know Fairy Dragon and Whimsy's list of options. The cards basically mention a random number, but since we know the interval of values, we can adequately and faithfully choose the correct one via a random number generator. Alright, so let's check them out. Ardent Angel is a 4/4 flyer for 6 mana, which is pretty weak as far as other creatures with similar stats are concerned. However, if it's in your upkeep, you have a 1 in 4 chance of reanimating it to the battlefield for free, so at least it passes the vanilla test. Even so, it's not really that good. Breath of Souza is a small global damage effect for just 2 mana. However, for each creature you choose a number at random between 0 and 2. This is the damage dealt to that creature. If you're lucky, this spell deals 0 damage to your creatures and 2 damage to each creature you don't control. Who knows, maybe the Lords of Chaos will smile upon you. Kamado Scout is a 2/3 for 3 mana with Landwalk of a basic land type chosen at random. You can assign 1 to Plains, 2 to Island, etc., and use a random number generator to determine which Landwalk it gets. It's not necessarily that powerful, but at least after determining which Landwalk it gets, you can at least tell the opponent is going to be attacking that it's doing so because of a random outcome. Hapado's Mite is an interesting pump spell. For 3 mana, you have the chance to give a creature +6/+0, but at the same time you could end up giving the creature +0/+0. This ratio of randomness of the spell for its casting cost reminds me of Pippa Duchess of Dice. For 3 and tapping, you create a creature token that can either be a 1/1 or a 6/6. So I guess Hapado's Mite seems fair in comparison. However, you have a 57% chance of pumping a creature for 3 or more for your investment in mana. So this card might not really be worth the gamble, especially when Giant Growth gives +3/+3 every single time for just 1 mana. Ladonna Druid is a really oppressive card even if it doesn't appear as such at first glance. When it enters the battlefield, you choose a basic land type for each land on the battlefield. Again, just choose a random number between 1 and 5 where 1 is Plains, 2 is Island, etc. Then the land becomes that type. This means that a player with 5 lands could end up with 2 islands, 1 forest, and 2 mountains, or 5 swamps, or 1 of each basic land, or any other possible combination. This effect also lasts indefinitely. So, unlike Blood Moon that changes all non-basic lands into mountains, that effect lasts as long as Blood Moon is on the battlefield. But even if you were to get rid of Ladonna Druid, your lands still stay affected. This isn't just non-basic lands either. Ladonna Druid changes each land on the battlefield into a basic land chosen at random. This can color screw somebody as well as remove the abilities of utility lands. So unless you want the salt to really flow, use this card at your own risk. Lothario Elephant is similar to the previously seen Necropolis of Azure and Hapado's Mite. This creature's power and toughness are both chosen at random and can have different outcomes. You can get lucky and get a 7/7 vanilla creature for 5 mana, or unlucky and get a 3/3 vanilla creature for 5 mana. You can also get a 5/6 or a 4/7, but the fact remains that it has no other keyword ability or anything else going for it beyond the potential of being a 7/7 for 5 mana. And you have a 4% chance in that happening, so this creature isn't really that good. Murgish Cemetery has a similar effect in that for 4 mana and discarding a card, we create a zombie token with varying power and toughness. At least in this case, the power and toughness remain the same. Even if you're unlucky and get a 2/2 zombie creature token, it's still not that bad for 4 mana. It's also a discard outlet. I would definitely consider this card for a commander cube that isn't super high powered. Maybe a more friendly cube with some fun and chaotic interactions could include this one, especially since it's more tame than some of the other cards we've seen so far. Sergeis Torrent can either be an epic spell for tapping down creatures or a total dud. For 2 mana you could potentially tap down 5 target creatures at instant speed. The randomness of this effect isn't in its targets like the Astral Set cards, but in the value of X. This spell is only bad if you get a 0 or a 1, but anything higher than that is decent for its mana cost. Tornellan Protector may seem like another weak overcosted creature with a protection effect. However, its effect isn't to prevent the next X damage dealt to that target, but to reduce by X any damage dealt to that target until end of turn. So even if you get the lowest value, you can still pair this with cards like Pestilence or Pyrohemia. No matter how many times you activate any of these enchantments, the creature protected by Tornellan Protector will receive 0 damage. So you could essentially wipe out the board but still have a creature left on the board. You can also use it to target yourself. So if you're being attacked, you can tap it in response and reduce the damage dealt to you by every creature. So if you were attacked by 51 ones, they would each deal you 0 damage. So it's definitely useful. Belacan Dragon is the best card out of all these random buffed creatures. It's a 5/5 with flying for 7 mana, which might seem overcosted. However, whenever it attacks or blocks, it gets +X+0 until end of turn, where X is a number chosen at random between 0 and 5. You have a 1 in 6 chance of not getting any boost, so everything else is a pump. Being able to swing in for a potential 10 power on a flyer is nothing to scoff at. Sure, there might be better beaters out there, but out of all of the cards revealed so far, if you weren't to include any in your commander cube, this should be one of them. The rest of the cards might be more familiar to most players since they were available in programs that are currently being used, those being MTGO and Arena. However, only one of the cards in MTGO's available card pool is only obtainable digitally on MTGO, and that's Gleemox. Gleemox basically laughs in the face of all the other Moxes. Yes, the official plural form of Mox is Moxes, since it can tap for any color without any restriction whatsoever. It also costs just 0 mana. The catch? It's banned. The card literally says it's banned right on it. However, when building a cube, you can include whatever you want. So Gleemox is only banned in your cube if you want it to be banned. Otherwise, nothing's stopping you from including it. More than likely, it might be the first pick of whoever drafts it, but if you want to include rare and obscure cards in your cube, this is definitely something to include. As for the cards exclusive to Arena, these might be more familiar to some players. These are only legal in Arena in Historic, so at least you can play them there. However, I will highlight my favorite ones of these for those looking to add something different to their cubes. Unlike the cards from the Micropose and Sega Dreamcast games, the cards exclusive to Arena can be found on Scryfall, so you can see them all there and check them out if you want to see the rest of them. Inspiring Commander is definitely a card I wish would be officially printed so I can run it in a Commander deck. It's a mono-white way to draw cards without investing in mana. Beyond paying its mana cost, you don't have to do anything else. It's essentially a free Mentor of the Meek but costs twice as much to cast. Zephyr Goal might seem unworthy of mentioning since it's just a 1/1 flyer for 1 mana, but plenty of decks wouldn't mind more of these cards, Edric Spy Master of Tress being one of them. So if you're looking for yet another flying man, here you go. Soul Hunter Rakshasa is a 5/5 for 5 mana whose only drawback is not being able to block. However, it deals 5 damage to an opponent when it enters the battlefield. With enough recursion effects, you can have it enter the battlefield multiple times to take out an opponent from the game, whether by blinking it a bunch of times or sacrificing it and reanimating it a bunch of times. Ogre Painbringer is similar since it deals 3 damage to each player when entering the battlefield. This also deals 3 damage to you, but at least it's a 7/3 for 5 mana that hits the table for 3 when it enters the battlefield. As long as you have more life than the rest of the table, you can blink this enough times to win. Or if you have a global effect that gives all of your creatures lifelink, you'd be gaining a ton of life each time this enters the battlefield. The final card I'm going to discuss in this video is Goblin Gang Leader. This is a card I desperately want in my Zada Hedron Grinder deck. It's perfect there. It also grows great in other Horde decks and Goblin Tribal decks. So if you're building a commander cube with tribal elements and are looking for more supporting cards, this is definitely what your Goblin deck needs. To all you viewers, which of these cards caught your eye? What do you feel about more random effects in Magic the Gathering? Are these cards you would consider using and including in your own Commander cubes? I'm interested in reading your opinions down in the comments. I would like to thank all my patrons for supporting me, and a quick shout out to all my higher tier patrons, the Brewers, for their patronage. I'd also like to thank anyone using my TCG Player affiliate link. That also helps out the channel. And to everyone, thanks for watching this episode of Barkeep Upkeep on the Commander Tavern. I am Demented Kirby, and thanks for listening.